I'm Michelle Smith, and you're listening to Gather Voices, the podcast aimed at helping you discover and create a beautiful, inspired life through community, conversation, and design. You can find more at the Gather Goods Co. online shop at gathergoodsco.com. And if you're in the Raleigh, North Carolina area, you can visit in person at our shared studios, showroom, and classroom space. Just let me know ahead of time so I can make sure that I'm there. And if you like this podcast, please tell your friends, leave a review, and subscribe. It makes a big difference and helps others to find us and get the word out. Earlier this week, I sat down and talked over Zoom to Preeti Waas, a small food-based entrepreneur. She has a little coffee and snack shop inside the YMCA in downtown Raleigh. She also has a food business where she makes jams and cookies. And she is currently expanding into a second space. And the goal of the second space is to provide teaching opportunities for people in need, homeless people, people who are trying to rise from their circumstances. So she's currently trying to raise $40,000 for that endeavor. And through our conversation, we touched on everything from the complications of running a food-based business. We talked about the idea of being a woman in business, and we talked about, being relentless with your goals. But ultimately, we talked about the value of education and how much we value not just teaching people, but also continuing that cycle of education. So I hope you enjoy this talk as much as I enjoyed talking with Preeti. Tell me a little bit about who you are and what you do.
My name is Preeti Waas, and I have been in the food service industry for almost 21 years now. And I have no formal training, education, or anything. I simply just like to feed people. Born of that need to feed was, my family will only eat so much, and my neighbors do enjoy my experiments, but after a certain point, I needed to pay for my ingredients, so I started selling what I was making and haven't stopped, it seems like.
You are an adjunct professor at Wake Tech, and you specialize in teaching others about how to start small food businesses. So is that kind of how you started from, doing what you were doing? Like, how did you get started? Because you make jams and cookies and you sell those at farmers markets, but now you also have a space inside the YMCA and you're going to expand to another space. So how does all that tie together?
I was approached by Wake Tech almost 4 years ago, I think. I was approached by their workforce development. I forget what you call him, but he was my supervisor. He ended up being my supervisor. But anyway, he approached me and he said, because I used to run a coffee shop for somebody else, and this person was a very frequent customer. I just didn't know he was with Wake Tech. And so he approached me actually and said, listen, I've been to the coffee shop. I've seen the kind of customer service that you offer. It seems like the kids that you hire, because we only had high school kids at the time. So it seems like all these people that you hire are also behaving like you, even when you're not there. So how'd you do that? And can you teach that? And so I said, sure, I'll give it a shot. So essentially, we then created this program, like a 3-week boot camp, that would allow people to earn at the end of those 3 weeks, 3 different certifications: Serve Safe certification, kitchen cook certification, and restaurant server certification. And as you can imagine, that's a lot to pack into 3 weeks. Add to the fact that that was a class that we specifically designed for teaching at homeless shelters. So I was teaching this class to men at the homeless shelter in downtown Raleigh over here. And that's how we got started with that. Then I was teaching the event planning course, and I wrote the curriculum for a baking course and a barista course. So
what has teaching taught you? And obviously you had experience before this. You ran the coffee shop and then you taught, and now you're teaching and doing this. How has all of that, what has that brought to what you're doing right now?
What I've found from teaching people is it taught me how to look at people, how to look at employees as more than just an employee. when you hire somebody, you forget the things, or you choose not to think about the things they bring to that job. And although in a perfect world, you're not supposed to bring your personal problems to work, which that's still not okay, but it gives you an understanding. It really gave me an understanding. For instance, when I hired students, they knew that anytime they had anything to do with school, if it was legitimate, they got the time off, no questions asked. I would cover the shift, but school came first, right? So it taught me how to do a give and take between employee, employer, that went beyond you make $10 an hour and you're supposed to show up for your shift.
I would think that that would obviously relate very closely to you working with people in the homeless shelter, especially, their work-life balance is especially skewed, right? So you probably have especially sensitive appreciation for what they're going through and how they really need flexibility. So that's really admirable that you're doing that, because, most employees either can't or they aren't aware of those circumstances.
It taught me how to respect the great challenges that they have even before they walk into a job interview. And if you haven't seen it, it's sort of out of sight, out of mind. You don't think about it. If it doesn't apply to you, you don't think about it. But the fact that I had to shift my teaching after the first couple of days, even when I realized I could teach these men how to chop and use knife skills. It means nothing if they won't even get entry into the door because they smell, because they've not had the opportunity to shower. So I started teaching. I incorporated actually the first 4 days out of a 3-week course. I then started teaching soft skills. And several of these men were coming out of incarceration and they don't know how to work as a team, because to work as a team is to be vulnerable, and you cannot be vulnerable when you're in prison. So they're so closed off, and they bring that to every situation after that. That's more circumstantial than it is to do with a person.
One of the things that I've always loved about having employees is just the mentorship aspect of it and the friendships that develop and the relationships you get to, learn about people from all walks of life. And
Yes.
I would imagine, the interesting thing is like you said, there's a teaching aspect, but they're teaching you things as well. And it's almost like you were saying about the customer service to your clients. You're
Yes.
also having to provide customer service in a way to your employees as well. So what sorts of things would other maybe employers who are not familiar or maybe a little hesitant to hire people who are coming out of incarceration or maybe homelessness or other challenges, what are things that employers should keep in mind as they're looking to hire this type of workforce?
I would say try and have a little empathy. That's the first step. And don't let it go over into pity, because pity is not what somebody needs. When they have brought themselves to your door, even in the hopes of an interview, it would really help to look beyond what a person is dressed like and to look in their eyes and treat them like a person first. Treat them like you would want to be treated, because so much of America is what, 2 paychecks away from homelessness. So there, but for the grace of God go I, is what I kept in my head when I was hiring people.
You started your business inside the YMCA as sort of like a pop-up, not a full kitchen, correct?
Correct.
And you started it right at the beginning of the pandemic. Is that true?
Well, just a couple months before. Mm-hmm.
So how has that affected everything? How has it been running a business when nobody is out doing things?
It has been incredibly difficult, but I still feel like I still had a kitchen, because I have a commissary kitchen that is not over here at the Y. So I still had access to a kitchen. I still had a roof over my head, and my husband still was able to keep his job. So, we are so far ahead or better off than what happened to so many people, especially in the hospitality industry, that I refuse to throw a pity party about it. It is what it is. And I will tell you that the YMCA has been the most fantastic partner and allowed me to stay in business, honestly.
Where is your kitchen commissary?
It's actually on our home property, which could not be better. It steps from my back door.
So my husband has a food-based business, and
Mhm.
that is, it's such a struggle. And I know you know this, you're teaching at Wake Tech. That is one of the biggest challenges that I've seen for small businesses. Now, I've
Yes.
worked with small businesses for almost 17 years now, for a really
Mhm.
long time. And I've seen, all sorts of the struggles, but food-based businesses, it's incredibly hard because finding an affordable commissary or getting a certified
Right.
kitchen when you have pets or
Mhm.
just your living space is incredibly difficult. For my
It
husband,
is.
he makes this peppermint bark, and
Right.
he started it as, so he works full time as a scientist, and
Okay.
he started making this chocolate treat as a holiday gift for friends. I had a store in downtown Cary,
Yep.
and he started realizing like, hey, I could like package and sell this. So
Right.
created a brand around it, and we created, this product, and it ended up being the most successful product that I've ever sold in my store. And I've sold a lot of different products, and so
Right.
really crazy. But he's working full time. We, at the time, we had a bigger kitchen, and we had a few cabinets that was dedicated to that,
Mhm.
but we didn't have any pets, as you couldn't
Mhm.
per the regulations.
Right.
And obviously, he made a product that he could make in our home kitchen. Many
Right.
people can't because they are under the Department of Health or the Department of
Right.
Agriculture. They're two different rules. So
Right.
he was able to make it in our house, but we wanted a pet. We wanted to move. So we
Mhm.
did move, and we ended up with a much smaller kitchen. We
Mhm.
started thinking about, well, what if we try to find a house with a mother-in-law suite? Or what if we,
Right.
try to find every single option out there? And
Right.
it was all just very, very, very difficult. It's still difficult and cost prohibitive, and the
Yes.
commissaries are insanely expensive. And there are
Yes.
all these regulations in Wake County against having commissaries, where
Right.
in other places it's easier. So for
Right.
us, the right decision is probably one day, if we can afford it, to build a little commissary space in our home in an outbuilding. But that also is incredibly cost prohibitive. So
It is.
what are your thoughts on all of that?
So I had been looking for 2.5 years for a space that I didn't want something in a very commercialized zone. I wanted to purchase an older home and turn it commercial. And that's where I kept running into problems because uh, changing the zoning to commercial is so expensive and so time consuming. And I just couldn't find the right space to do that. And so I thought, okay, well, for now, maybe I'll just put that part of my business plan on hold, but I still need a larger kitchen. I need a dedicated kitchen. So I researched the laws, and we ended up purchasing a property, and we moved for the sole purpose of me having a commissary kitchen. We bought a house, and the specific criteria was it had to be at least 2 miles outside of the city of Raleigh, which is what we found, but it's still in Raleigh. Still Wake County, but it's we were looking for a house that had a detached garage. And so again, I looked for such a long time. It was very specific needs. And the day this property came on the market, we went and looked at it, placed an offer, and were able to purchase it. And I did almost all the work myself into turning it into a commissary kitchen. And of course, just electrical and plumbing, I had to hire out.
And it's very expensive to do all of that stuff.
It is, but again, I had been leverage one thing to use for that, knowing that I would get the return from it. And so far, we were getting the return from it, and then the pandemic hit.
Right. Well, and also, if you're paying money towards that rent, $600, $800 a month, which is
Yeah,
like the minimum of what these commissary kitchens call for, and
right,
the minimum amount of space. And,
right.
if you're not, the profit margin is so slim on that.
It
And
is.
it's just really challenging. But to be able to have the freedom to go in your backyard and cook whenever you need to cook. So I love how Ina Garden has like a
Yes.
barn on her property. That's the dream.
Want to be Ina Garten. Can I be Ina Garten?
You're living the dream. You're doing it. You're basically her.
Not quite on the Hampton scale, but it still falls under Department of Ag. But because it's a detached structure, and I have a hand washing sink and dishwashing sink, and it's all of that is separate. It's a catering commissary.
So are you able to bake your baked goods and stuff there, and that still
Mhm.
falls under Department of Ag?
Yes, yes,
you-
because I can do everything refrigerated, right? Because I have enough refrigeration and freezer space,
Mhm.
so I can make almost anything.
I think you're doing it the smart way. And obviously you've talked to so many other food producers throughout your teaching years, and you've seen what other people are experiencing, that you knew how to do it and what to do. So that's really great.
Well, also there was a hole in the market, right? I was trying to fill that hole in the market.
What
So,
advice would you give for other starting out food producers who are having a hard time with the commissary kitchen and the farmers markets and the producing it all? Like, do you have any advice for what they should do to, operate their business in a sustainable way?
so sustainable is the key word, and costs are so prohibitive that is what holds most people back, or in so many cases, honestly, makes people feel like they can skirt the laws. They'll just make it out of their home kitchen. Who's gonna know? I would say that first of all, I'll say that that's not worth it, because if you were to get found out, if somebody were to report you, that outcome is simply not worth what gain you may have had up until that point. So that's one thing. But in order to find something sustainable, this is a little radical, but I would say that anybody who wants to do this, form a co-op. See if you all can rent a kitchen together. Because to me, that would be sustainable. It's not an easy solution, but neither is it's working towards something. If you're serious enough about it, and if you have certain like-minded people, I think if like 4 or 5 or 6 people were to form a co-op, invest your money. Right now, there are kitchens available. Go ahead and make the leap.
Yeah, baby steps, but also like a bigger baby step that you can take with other people.
Exactly, and to me, that would be long-term sustainable.
I personally, now I'm the kind of person who builds things that don't exist. That's what drives my business, and also to help people.
Right.
I followed you for a while, but when you posted a few days ago about what you were trying to do, and then I dug deeper into what you did, I was like, oh my gosh, I have to talk to you. So many cool things.
Well, I've been to Gather.
So Gather is built because there was a need for office space that to me felt like, as a woman entrepreneur, especially, I started out as a maker entrepreneur.
Yeah.
And that became my focus, was really incubating and helping maker entrepreneurs. But as the world evolved and more resources became available, it really started changing to just women entrepreneurs or entrepreneurs in general.
Right.
But creating softer spaces, like you were talking about those soft skills. To me, my passion is really about creating spaces where people thrive, alternative communities where everybody can be accepted, despite their backgrounds, despite their, people who feel like they don't fit into the sort of hard-edged, masculine, tech-driven venture capital.
Right.
There's just so much of that out there, and it's so loud and noisy. And to me, as a very specific introverted person who really loves my home and really I love connecting one-on-one with people, but networking in a traditional sense just doesn't work for me. And so
I feel the same way.
I didn't see anything out there that was really addressing those needs. I wasn't seeing an office space that felt reflective of what I needed. And so I built it. And I've really appreciated the relationships that I've made along the way. But I also still see a significant need for a food commissary. I've been trying to find somebody. If you ever come across somebody who needs just a department of ag, I have a space they can use. which is a lot of people need, and it's a lot
Right.
less than a commissary kitchen, and they're going to get a lot more
Yes.
of that ability, that flexibility. So you have the commissary in your house or in a
Mhm.
building on your property,
Yes.
and you bring your baked goods every day to this
Hmm.
little spot in the YMCA.
Yes.
Um, what has it been like? How is operating a location inside of a gym different than selling your goods at the farmer's market?
So, the demographic of people who, at a farmer's market, for instance, people are coming there for the sole purpose of purchasing or to browse. And if you offer them a delectable enough sample, they're bound to purchase, right? So that interaction is very different. What I have found at the gym is that I had thought the majority of my business would come from gym goers, and that's not been the case because they come in very focused, they go work out, and they leave very focused. They're not dawdling.
Plus, they're also trying to get fit, and your treats are like tempting them.
But I offer a very good balance. I have all fruit smoothies. We have healthy as what we offer is nutrition. It's not health fad stuff. It's just straight up nutrition because Indian food, a lot of Indian food is so nutritious, even the snack foods. So the interaction is very different there. But I will say that it could have been a detriment. But again, if you're relentless and you keep at something, you're bound to see the benefit of that. So even if we don't have as many customers from the gym goers, situated where we are with these gorgeous windows, floor to ceiling, like really ceiling windows, we're very visible, and you have to take advantage of that visibility. And you have to know that people can see you all the time.
Yeah, I mean,
So
in a way, it's kind of like the idea of being in a farmer's market, and even when people don't buy, they're still maybe taking your card, and that will come back,
yes,
down the road.
yes,
The people who are coming, the thousands of people who have gym memberships are coming in, they're seeing your name, they're recognizing it, and they're getting to know you, even if they're not purchasing anything.
right,
And they may later come in and buy something off the street when they're thinking about it, or they may mention it to a friend if they're looking for,
precisely.
something like that. So those kinds of things are really hard to put a tangible value on, but end up having, and plus you're getting, I assume, a really great rate to be inside of a small space, but in a, like you said, very visible location that you wouldn't be able to
Yes.
afford otherwise.
Mm-mm, not at all. And here's the other part of it is that you have to set yourself apart from the crowd because there's coffee shops everywhere, right? So I don't build myself as a coffee shop. I'm a tiny snack and chai shop. And we offer Indian American snacks, we offer nutrition, we offer we offer something that downtown Raleigh does not have, but you wouldn't know it until you walked up to us and talk to us about it, right? So our social media presence really helps with that. And it helps me. We had people coming in from Cary and Morrisville where there's a plethora of Indian food available to them, but they would come here on weekends, just come have chaat and chai with us because we don't compromise on quality at all.
It's interesting. That's something that I found with my business as well. I tend to be a doer and not a sayer.
Mm-hmm.
And I always have a hard time explaining, my elevator pitch is not refined. And when
Uh-huh.
people ask what Gather is, sometimes I have a hard time explaining it because
Yeah.
you have to experience Gather to understand what it is. And so that's
Mm-hmm.
not going to be scalable in the traditional sense. But every
Right.
single person who has come inside of it, once you interact with it, you understand intuitively. And so that sounds very similar to what you're saying, right? Like you can
Yes.
advertise till you're blue in the face that you're,
Mm-hmm.
doing what you're doing. People can, but unless they are interacting with you personally or they're interacting with the business, it's
Yes.
not going to set itself apart probably. Maybe that's a lesson for both of us is like how do we do that? That's probably how we need to stretch ourselves, but at the same time we have such a quality, we care so much about that quality and that customer service experience that it's what's on the inside that counts instead of what's on the outside, and that there's a big focus on that.
Yes, but you can draw people in as in the difference between sitting behind the counter on your phone versus constantly being on. And as gym goers are passing me, almost never, I smile at everybody. I say hello to everybody because I'm not shy. And if that's the first and only interaction they're having with me, even if they've never stopped to buy so much as a bottle of water from me, it doesn't matter. They're going to remember me.
Right. Yeah, it's almost like when I was doing the Rock and Shop market or the farmers markets, there's always the vendors who just sit back and they look at their phone and they kind of try to, you have to be engaging with your customers. You have
you
to,
do.
Draw them in some capacity, or else it's not going to work.
And I'll put it this way: you become a maker, whether it's an artisan food producer or whatever. If you ask anybody why they did it, they will tell you it's because they love to bake or they love to make chutneys. It's because they love what they do, right? But if you put that love and that attention and that time into your ingredients and the making of it, but you don't bring that same attention to the selling of it, you're shooting yourself for the foot. You're only doing yourself a disservice. And in a way, you're also doing customers a disservice because you're not giving them the opportunity to experience you. And so they don't know, so they can't really trust the product. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's hard for a lot of business owners, I think, to recognize, especially emerging business owners, whether it's food or product or whatever it is, you have to really, I think the most challenging aspect is knowing that you have to be all things. And you can't be
Yes.
all things, but you have to try to be all things. And that is difficult.
It sounds like you and I similar, Michelle. Even though so much may take our time, energy, and attention, that doesn't close us off to what else might be out there.
I will tell you all my ideas. That's the kind of person I am. I just give them away, and people sometimes take them, and there's a book I love. It's called Big Magic, and I highly recommend reading it. I'm actually creating a course. I'm hosting a course right now, and it's all about discovering and creating a more fulfilled life. And right now, this week, the module is about reading Big Magic. But in the book, the writer Elizabeth Gilbert, she talks about the idea of like ideas living in the universe, and like we all have them, and if we don't take them, somebody else will, and we have to be okay with that. And that ideas are collective, that they're not just like ours. And I have definitely gone through because I'm such an idea person like you, I have had 100 ideas that have been implemented by other people.
Right, I feel the same way.
Yeah, when I was younger, it was harder for me, right? Because I felt really possessive of them. Like, well, why am I not getting to do that thing?
Right.
Why is that person succeeding at it and I'm not?
Right.
But now I've completely sort of switched gears, and I'm like, I just give it all away because there's so much out there. And if somebody else gets to fulfill the dream that I had in my brain, great, then it's out there and it's getting fulfilled.
And it's still fulfilling.
It's still fulfilling, and you don't have to be the one to run it. I sort of built my own island around me. That's what I do best. Not really relying on other people, because I always felt like I was never taken seriously. I mean, I was advocating for micro shops 15, 16 years ago, and I was telling the right people and it was like it was like falling on deaf ears. I've never felt like, again, it's sort of like those ideas, right? You give your ideas to people. Same with like being a entrepreneur that is respected by the right quote kind of people.
Right.
You know, you can speak until you're blue in the face, but if you're like a woman who looks younger than she is, or whatever it is, if you're not in the right,
or a woman who doesn't talk about the bottom line first,
if you're not an investor in the traditional sense, all of that stuff, if you're not seeking venture capital funding, or you're not interested in that route of running capitalism, then your business is not seen at all. It's almost like it's just, and so that has always been very frustrating to me, talking about issues and feeling like they don't resonate. But, I tell my daughter this all the time. She is 13, and social justice matters to her, as it does for a lot of younger generations, right? Part of their DNA. It takes a lifetime. to make these things that feel so important right now, it's a lifetime's worth of work. It's not just
Mhm.
like, 1 year, 4 years. I mean, it's literally like the things that you're advocating for now
Relentless.
take until my daughter may be, an old woman before they get passed.
Yeah.
Um,
But you have to be relentless.
you have to keep at it. Yeah.
Yes.
What's currently inspiring you?
That's a hard one to answer because, and I'm being very honest, because I wouldn't call it so much inspiration as a push and a need. So currently, I have a need because we have a goal in our family, and my goal currently is I have one daughter currently in college, another one who's about to go to college this year. So I really have a need and a push to make what I'm doing successful so that I can educate them. And so not everything has to be feel good inspiration, right? You can have concrete pushes that achieve the same result. Education is paramount in India. That's what even people who cannot afford much will do whatever they can to educate their children.
I really love this conversation that I had with Preeti, and I hope you enjoyed listening to it as much as I enjoyed having it. I really enjoyed that we talked about the value of education and advocating for not just yourself, but also others. If you want to find out more about Preeti, if you want to support her new venture, you can follow her online at CheniRaleigh.com, CheeniRaleigh.com. And of course, you can find out more about Gather at gathergoodsco.com, gathergoodsco.com.